Bob, why are you in London at this time?
Okay, well, my wife Nicole and I have come here to give a talk at the Museum of London, and we're going to be on a panel with other people talking about the connections or the intersections between Palestine and First Nations people here in Canada.
Both being indigenous peoples, you had mentioned something about how the colonialism construct affects indigenous peoples everywhere around the world.
I've been trying to bring attention to that because, we have this idea, or this idea has been put upon us. One of those colonial constructions is that Aboriginal people in Canada should not talk about or shouldn't be interested in what's happening in the rest of the world. Let's keep it in the family. Let's not let it out of Canada that there were residential schools, that people still live on reserves. Let's not talk about the problems of colonialism here in Canada abroad. But actually, we need to do that, because colonialism is an international scourge. Colonialism didn't just grow up in individual places. It grew up as a process of the 16th, 17th, 18th century, 19th century, 20th century. And so it's still here present, and people around the world suffer from it in the same way that Aboriginal people here do.
So you're building bridges with other indigenous groups around the world at this time to raise that awareness?
Yeah, we'd like to identify where Canadian Aboriginal people can share knowledge, can share understanding and insights into how to decolonize. The world really does want to decolonize. We're facing global warming. We're facing unsustainable use of resources, and those resources are being still stolen off of indigenous lands. And so we need to make contact. We need to make relations with people who are experiencing the same things we are.
As the former retired chief of the Ardoch Algonquin people, maybe you can elaborate a little bit about the Indian Act, about your resistance to uranium exploration on your traditional territory. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay, I could talk to you all day about the Indian Act.
That's it. Yeah.
It's interesting what's happening in Canada right now. The Prime Minister stands up and he says we can't get rid of the Indian Act. And in fact, that's exactly what's happening, is that the federal government is passing legislation, the First Nations Property Management Act, the First Nations Election Transparency Act, and all of these smaller acts will take the place of the Indian Act, so that at one point there will not have to be a constitutional discussion. There will not have to be a discussion with Aboriginal people. It will be a fait accompli that simply these smaller acts actually govern the lives of indigenous people, and there's no constitutional question even to argue about. And I think that most Canadians, even Aboriginal people, aren't aware that that process is going on, and it's very serious. We need to get rid of the Indian Act in a proper discussion at a constitutional level in this country, if all Canadians are to take part in the changes in that relationship that need to take place. It can't be just piecemeal, and that's going on. Now, how does that affect, why is that going on? It's going on so that the status quo can be maintained, so that things like the Mining Act remain basically unchanged. When I was in prison a couple of years, about 4 years ago, the chief and council from KI were in prison at the same time. Ontario decided it would change its Mining Act, but it really only gave lip service to those changes. Because today, in fact, my wife and I were just in Toronto with people from KI to protest. There's another mining company after their lands, and once again the province is standing by the Mining Act and saying, you know what, you had a chance to consult, and we all know what consultation is. It's a level of tokenism, and that's all it is. Because if you have no veto power, you have no freedom. If you can't say no, you have no freedom at all. So, the legislation really hasn't changed. A lot of Canadians think that colonialism is a thing of the past in Canada, because we were once a colony, now we're independent. Well, the truth is that the people who were actually colonized are no more independent than they ever have been since colonization began.
Yes. So maybe when you actually stood up against the mining company, the uranium mining company. What transpired right after was that you ended up being criminalized for your resistance, and then you ended up going to jail. Yeah. And as well as you going to jail, the people from KI, Big Trout Lake, all went to jail as well, because they were standing up as well at another time in place north of, in the Ring of Fire area. And so this rally that you went to was all about that, was it?
It was all about that. They're facing another mining company. Thank goodness the mining company that staked 30,000 acres of our territory has backed off and haven't come back. But there's no guarantee that they will. The financial downturn has slowed things down in that respect, but not for good. And so we expect that. But it also, and I want to speak about one of the positive things about this relationship with KI is because they were facing the same sort of threats that we were. We got together and we started talking over strategies. And this is what I'm talking about in terms of internationalization, is talk with people who, like the Palestinians in Gaza, who actually live in the largest Indian reserve in the world. And let's talk about how they can gain their liberation as well. But what happened with KI and us, we shared a lot of ideas, and the real positive thing, besides the demonstration that happened yesterday in Toronto, was that they came to our community on Saturday, and we presented them with a wampum. And that wampum showed our community and their community stretching across, holding hands over the Anishinaabe dish. And that is, in my understanding, the first wampum that has passed between two nations in a very, very long time. And those wampum were brought from the Long Island Sound, and they were worked into a proper wampum. And so this is the kind of thing that we need to do. We need to share the values that we have and the ways that we communicate together.
So you're bringing forward an historical way of coming to agreement and contractualizing an understanding.
The understanding is we've got each other's back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's really good. You were released. You were all liberated from prison at a very significant time when our people were gathered on Queen's Park.
Yeah.
And you came out.
Yeah.
And you had just gotten out of jail. And what was that like?
I had been sentenced to 6 months, and I did 3.5. The last day was probably the hardest. I was brought down from Central East. And I have to tell your students here that if they want to be in a place where they can read and write a lot, jail's a great place for that.
You did a lot of that.
Yeah, did a lot of reading and writing. But the last day was hard. I was brought down, and when I was brought into the Don jail, the truck, I was brought in alone in the truck, and it was parked in the Sally Port for about an hour with the engine running, and I was literally almost gassed to death.
Oh, really?
Through carbon monoxide.
Yeah.
It's enclosed. They simply left me in there with the engine running, and I could hardly walk. I was throwing up. And then the Don jail is not the best place to spend the night. If people are you can't get much reading and writing done in the Don jail.
Yeah. But at that time, wasn't that the rally of the HST, or one of the rallies that our people were coming together?
It was a big gathering around Defenders of the Land. And Defenders of the Land was making a statement to Ontario that maybe you consider this one of the first Occupy encampments, because people set up tents and they set up the teepees and camped out on the front lawn of Queen's Park. And it was a big rally to say, if you're going to try to occupy our lands, we're going to occupy your lands.
I remember you had some solidarity with the Ipperwash story, Stony Point. We came up to Ottawa. You had a sacred fire for us.
Yeah.
Sacred fire ceremony for us.
Yeah.
And that was a real cultural bridging that took place at that time. But you've also been working within the institutions, Corrections Canada, penal federal institutions, that our friend Peter Cole accompanied you on a couple of those trips.
He did, yeah.
But you're taking into them something that is so vital to who they are. You're reigniting the spirit back in their lives So I just want to pay tribute to you for doing that kind of work as well.
Thank you. It's really unfortunate, but often men for the first time find out who their elders are, find out who they are as Anishinaabe people or Haudenosaunee people. They get into trouble, and they've always sort of felt something missing in their lives, something missing in their personality. So they walk around through this world as partial people. And then fortunately, Corrections Canada and the provincial system has, in some way, and I'm not going to give them a lot of credit for this, but they do allow elders and people working in the prison, and men will say, you know what, there's always been something missing, and I understand what you're talking about. You know, I could feel it in my soul, and that's where the emptiness has always been, and they start to turn their lives around.
Now, what was this occasion where you were in a, was it a Greek harbor, and you went out on a canoe, and you, maybe you can tell our audience about that.
Well, the Greek authorities, we were hoping to take some medical supplies and break the blockade at Gaza. Gaza has been blockaded now for almost a dozen years, and people can't get in. Fishermen can't get out into the ocean to fish, you know, and people can't bring in school supplies. There's a list of contraband articles, just the basic things that you and I have in our bathroom that the people can't get a hold of in Gaza. And if you can imagine, you know, having your city completely surrounded and walled in and not being able to get in or out. That's what Gaza is. So I was part of a group here from Canada, and there were people from other nations on other boats, and our design last spring was to break the blockade and bring in as much humanitarian aid as we could. We left Ardoch Nicola in Crete, in Greece, and the Greek authorities didn't want us to go, so they chased us down. They boarded the ship with machine guns, and they stopped us from going. And so the group tried again from Turkey this last fall, and the Tahrir, that's our ship, the Canadian ship, it was chased down again, but this time by the Israelis. It was impounded. 6 Canadians went to Israeli jails for a short period of time, for about a week and a half. Finally were released, and but the movement goes on. We're hoping to get the boat back sometime, but I don't think the Israelis are going to let it go. But if the internet, and this is another good example where the international community comes together and works together to free people, and that's something we need to generate here in Canada. We need Anishinaabe people and Haudenosaunee people from all over Turtle Island to say, you know, this is what's happening in Canada. This is what's actually happening. We are part of the world, and we are sovereign peoples that deserve to be reunited with our original jurisdiction. That the Declaration of Indigenous Rights by the UN, it means something in this country, and we want people from the rest of the world to recognize that.
Is that what you tell your students at Queen's University and at Sir Sanford Fleming in Peterborough?
I tell them a lot of stuff. And yes, I tell them that as Anishinaabe people, we have to look over the barricades, we have to look beyond the national borders, and we have to recognize that who peoples are. You know, the nation state is a relatively recent phenomena. It grew up with capitalism, it grew up with colonialism, but historically, people have been peoples for literally millennia. And you know, we come together and we live within ecosystems in sustainable ways as Indigenous people, and we respect the people across the mountains or across the or up the river, and that's the way people should be getting along.